All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Sharks World. Shark host, and today I have the pleasure and privilege of interviewing the man, the myth, the legend himself, White Shark Videos, where some of you know him, Mr. Skyler Thomas. Skyler, how you doing this evening?
Hey, thanks for having me. I don't know if I measure up to that introduction, but I appreciate it anyway.
Hey, I've heard nothing but good things about you, so thank you for taking time out your day. I know you're a busy man, so it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, I look forward to talking sharks with you.
Exactly. So before we really get into it, Skylar, would you like to give the audience a bit of an introduction as to who you are, what you do, stuff you have as far as products and everything?
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's see. I've been diving with sharks. My first shark dive was in 99, and then I got started with great whites in 2004, and then it just sort of kept building for a while and got really into it, dove with 20 some species. I've spent a considerable time with white sharks. Got really pulled into what I considered to be miseducation of sharks and false hopes of some of the TV shows that you see on TV that are trying to justify what I call abuse of the sharks. So things got deep quickly instead of just being fun. And eventually I moved on to trying to advocate for other wildlife. So I've been a little out of the shark loop for a while, as people may have noticed, but I'm going to try to remedy that, making a push. I've got a film coming out the end of this summer and spending a little bit of time on YouTube making fun of Shark Week. So I'm getting back in the mix.
Hey, I'm glad you are. In all honesty, watching a lot of your older content from like years and years ago is kind of what got me started on this YouTube channel. Just kind of seeing you like putting out a different message and actually calling out misinformation when it was presented. That definitely was like, hey, this guy's putting in the work. I need to be doing the same. So
Oh,
you definitely had an impact on me there.
that's good to hear. I always like to hear things like that.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned that you have a movie coming out. Tell me a little bit more about that.
This I filmed in South Africa on the Durban coast. I usually spend most of the time on the Cape Coast, where white sharks used to be prevalent, and now they're missing. So that tells you how quickly things change. Uh, they hadn't even disappeared when I was filming this current film, and now now there's some pretty serious concern about the state of the white sharks down there. My focus for this one, it was a follow up to my film about shark culling, the shark film called Great White Lies, which mostly talked about Australia. And a lot of people said, "Oh yeah, but the shark nets in Durban really do work, and they really did make people safe." So I went over there to find out if that was true, and went with a couple of shark buddies who are now actually doing quite well as cinematographers. And we really dug up some pretty powerful stuff that exposes the organization that is killing sharks while calling themselves a conservation company.
Really now, that is a that is more than a little bit concerning.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
On multiple levels. One of the reasons it's taken so long to edit is that I'm trying to just stick with the main story, but yeah, it gets tempting to get into philosophical decisions. It's like, at what point are humans going to stop accepting any excuse to kill animals? It's just like, yeah, but it's not endangered, or yeah, it's not protected, or yeah, it's sustainable. And I'm looking at the way these animals are dying, and I'm like, I don't give a shit what the status of the animal is. When did we become a species that just shrugs off horrifying death because you have an excuse? So you see what I mean? The subject could get kind of deep and introspective of the human species itself, but I tried to steer away from that because, yeah, I mean, some films are okay for that, and other films it's like, you got people walking out of the theater.
yeah, big time. Uh, it looks like we have somebody who's asking about your film. Wild World is asking, is this the last shark film?
Um, is that the title of a film? That's not the title of mine. So no, I don't know that one. Like I said, I've been out of the shark world, so I'm not familiar with the last shark film.
Okay. But back to your point about South Africa. I've been hearing more and more about folks, blaming it on the orcas, which I know you have been digging into them rather thoroughly about that topic.
Yeah. I you want me to go into that?
Yeah, sure. Just because I, I look, I like orcas as much as the next person, and I think they're just animals. Some people are calling them as like, oh, they're the super Giga Chad Master Chief, ultimate badass of the ocean. But it's like they're just animals, man. And
Yeah.
people forget that great whites and orcas have been doing this little dance for long before we've been in here. They were doing it when Megalodon was still here. So when
Well,
folks act like, "Oh my god, this is new," it's like, no, man.
that tends to be the case with so many things. People hear about something for the first time and then they like go and post it and like, oh my god, did you hear about what's happening? Or if a shark is sighted on a beach and somebody says, oh, there's a shark swarm, it's like there have always been sharks at that beach. You heard about it and now you think it's news and something to be concerned about. The orcas, obviously, we weren't around to record what kind of interactions were taking place with white sharks and orcas throughout history, but it's a bit of a stretch to think that it didn't happen from time to time over the ages, especially considering how easy it appears to be for the orcas to do it when they want to do it.
Yeah.
More more
Sorry. Go ahead.
concerning than that is that you have a group of scientists down there that's really riding this gravy train of blaming the orcas. I mean, Shark Week must have put out 8 shows based on that by now, and it just started in 2017.
Is it up
And
to 8? Jesus.
I don't know. I'm not sure. There's a lot because they've done at least one per year on the topic, and even some of the excuses to like. There's one that I want to make fun of next when they went to New Zealand, because the white sharks were chased out of South Africa because of the orcas. So the rest of that show isn't necessarily about it, but they still managed to fit into the show the blame about the orcas and here's why we're going to New Zealand, etc. Thing is, clearly orcas do cause white sharks to react in a way, and they are known to leave an area. This is a little bit different, and for a group of scientists to conclude something like that and declare it as fact when there's another group of scientists, which people aren't hearing about because their story isn't as popular, are saying no, it's because of these fishing permits that were started right where the white sharks like to hunt for fish and smaller sharks during certain months of the year. And their food supply has been wiped out, and some of the sharks themselves have been killed with the fishing gear. And the studies show that the decline began before the orcas even arrived. Now, I guess what I'm really upset about is sure, the orcas contributed, but the effort put into distracting people from what the real problem is does not seem like an attitude of conservation on the part of the scientists.
I 100% agree with you there. And to kind of bounce off that point, the thing a lot of people don't really like understand about nature and biology in general is rarely do things happen for like a single reason within context, of course. Like everyone loves to talk about Megalodon. Oh, why did Megalodon go extinct? Or it went extinct for this reason or this reason. Megalodon went extinct for a multitude of small reasons that all piled up together. Same with dinosaurs.
Sure. Well, unless you buy into the meteor, that's one pretty big reason.
Yeah. So that's why I say within context. Some big reasons like a meteor, that's like, yeah, that'll probably wipe out more than a few species. But back to your point, it's still like orcas probably contributed, but I'm with you as to like they're not the sole reason as to why this was happening. This was probably because of human activity, and
White.
people don't want to call it out.
Let me paint a picture for your listeners. The white sharks were known to aggregate at three main hotspots. It wasn't limited to those hotspots, but you had the seal colonies of False Bay, Hunts Bay, and Mossel Bay. Great places to go and see white sharks. The cage diving tourism was just going crazy there. And up on the East Coast, Durban, where my new film is based, they have, for the sake of tourism, all of these nets and drum lines that kill a multitude of animals. Well, it turns out, and they actually learned this decades ago, that white sharks migrate up that coast, and they've been killing an average of 32, or catching an average of 32 white sharks per year since the mid 70s. Now, your listeners probably know white sharks don't breed quickly, and they don't breed until they are rather old and they have a rather small pup size, and then the chances of those pups even surviving to reach adulthood is low. So you have this predator up at the top, but part of nature's design is if you're going to be that lethal of a predator, we're not going to make very many of you. So
Agreed. Yes.
when humans come around and throw a wrench in that, it's hard for the species to just shake that off. Now you add killing them in their other location via fishing and wiping out their food supply, they're getting hit on both sides. Now some orcas come in and conveniently provide a scapegoat, and all eyes are on these orcas instead of looking at the fishing industry and these nets that are killing them.
Yeah, definitely. That you hit the nail on the head there as far as that goes. White sharks do indeed. It takes, with most predators, in all honesty, when they're giving birth, it takes a lot for that predator to go from baby to hit the top of the food chain, and a lot of stuff can go wrong. Orcas and human activity just add to the mix.
Yeah,
especially the human activity.
Yeah, we as humans, our lives are kind of privileged compared to wildlife. So maybe we forget that every single day is a struggle to find food, not to be eaten, to avoid an injury. Because if you get injured, you're going to become more attractive prey. You're going to have a harder time catching prey. You're not going to be attractive as a mate. All these things that we don't really deal with, and therefore maybe it's not on our minds that just because something is born doesn't mean that it becomes an adult.
Yeah, exactly. And so let me ask you about that. Actually, now that I think about it, so some observations that some of the people have made me aware of, but I haven't been able to verify, is that the size or the upper limits of species that people are finding nowadays has been getting smaller and smaller, as in like they're finding less really big blue whales or less really big whale sharks or white sharks, etc. What's been your experience with that? I personally have no way to verify that.
Well, guess it depends on your source of information, because the news wants you to think that they keep finding these giants. I'm not, I haven't been spending a lot of time on it, but the little bit of time I did get back on in order to research these YouTube videos, that's all I'm seeing is, giants have been found here, and the biggest ever recorded of this has been found. So either that's completely untrue, or something's happening that we're finding animals that we shouldn't be finding. Like the fishing fleets are looking harder and going to places they never went before. And so the last remaining giants are being found, or the climate change and the food depletion and other things are causing the giants to leave the areas that they were. And you mentioned that you're finding less of big ones. That's probably true, but that can be combined with finding a handful of the last true giants, while overall size has shrunk.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that can also somewhat segue into one of our next questions, because I know you've had quite an experience with this particular topic. What's been your experience as far as shark tagging goes?
Well, I'm not a fan. Um, I think it's a distraction. I think it's something that gives humans false hope that sticking technology on an animal and then getting data and analyzing it in a lab is going to change anything about what's going on wrong. Like, we know what the problem is, or at least I do. You don't have to look very far. I mean, you can see the fishing vessel that's killing the animals that you're studying from the same boat that you're attaching the tag to the shark. You don't have to really look very far to find out why sharks are dying. And it makes it worse that this storyline has been going on forever. It was going on the second I entered into the shark world. And in 2004, when I was working on a shark boat in South Africa, I remember someone there saying, "Man, we've been tagging these sharks for so long. When's it going to be enough?" And that was in 2004.
Oh wow.
And it went on way before that. And I've interviewed some of the pioneers, and of course, they were learning about sharks way before I ever got into the picture. And see, the great hope is that this data is going to affect policy change, and then laws are going to go into place that protect these animals. We already have protected species, and they're not being protected for shit. Excuse my language. Sorry.
No worries, I get it.
If we're not enforcing laws that already exist, continuously going out trying to find more data in order to protect these animals, well, we're already failing to do what we've already accomplished. We won the battle. We won the battles to get the animals listed. We won the battles to say don't do this and don't do that, and yet they're dying anyway. So maybe we need to take a look at ourselves rather than continue to grab new data.
But Skyler, come on, we're humans. We can never be the bad guys.
Well, sometimes it seems that way. That's why the orcas are such a popular topic. Hey, look at the orca. Don't look at the fishing industry. Don't look at the tourism industry, drowning animals off the coast so we can use the ocean for recreation.
I know, right? Speaking of stuff along these lines, I always hear, and especially on Shark Week, Shark Fest, wherever it is, they're always saying it's like, we know little to nothing about great whites, next to nothing. And
Oh, God.
I distinctly remember you putting out a video where you like no script whatsoever started naming off the stuff that we do know. So for the audience, how much do we know about sharks?
Absurd amounts, like trivial data that I don't know what you would do with other than say, hey, we learned it, we jotted it down. To me, I'm an observer. I like to look at the animal's behavior and see how it interacts with its environment and with other organisms. I'm not really interested in taking a tissue sample and going to the lab or measuring, pulling a shark out of the ocean and measuring it. I'd rather be down in the water watching it.
You and me both.
The thing is, like, we've learned what are some trivial details that even embryos have mercury in their flesh because the condition of the ocean is so bad. We know how many tail beats they have during a migration path. We know the speed that they go. I mean, does anyone not find it suspicious that all these people looking for high profiles are continuously studying the white shark? And the white shark was protected in the United States in 93, South Africa in 91, etc. Everybody's studying them. Oh, what was can't remember off the top of my head, but I think I said it in that video that you were referencing, the number of papers on white sharks that come out every year.
No kidding. Yeah.
It's just a line. It's just a dramatic line that if you aren't prepared to be skeptical about it, you're going to say, oh, wow, that sounds impressive. Oh, we know nothing about these animals, and learning about them is the key to solving how we're going to save them. It's not true. We know. And based on pure observations and fishing records from like the early 1900s, you could figure out where the babies were. You could figure out where the giants were based on where people saw them and caught them. And for some reason, people want to believe that, well, unless we catch on camera an animal being born in a spot, then we don't know how to protect the species. That doesn't make any sense. You know, once tell me how after we see a white shark giving birth, we're now going to protect it.
I agree. Like based on all the stuff that we've seen, like in very similar to you, I'm an observer. I like to observe things. And when you just look at some of the stuff that we found, it's like, hey, these sharks were caught in these areas. These smaller sharks were seen or caught in this area. Okay, something must be going on with those areas. Just some basic deductive reasoning to where you can put two and two together. We can find out a lot about these animals. And I agree. I do find it strange that the white shark, it's the charismatic species. We've been studying it for so long, and yet for some reason everyone always says, oh, we know more about T-Rex than the great white. Do we really though? Do we really?
No, I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, and honestly, there are a bunch of other sharks that everyone always wants to pay attention. Oh, what about the dangerous species? How many people know that the most represented species of sharks is in like the biggest family comes from like the cat sharks or the dogfish? Nobody knows about that. Everyone always wants to pay attention to the big teeth. Sharks are more than just big teeth. They act a lot like us in many ways, believe it or not. Hence my shark personality video I just put out.
Yeah. And we were talking about this before the show started. People, or at least myself, being attracted to the idea of a monster. I mean, the big teeth, even though technically it should be scary, is alluring to us.
For some reason, yeah, and I don't know why. Like a lot of like there's people who don't know that sometimes sharks, I guess what you could call the equivalent of sneezing under whether that sharks sneeze, or that sometimes they scratch their backs, like they get itchy backs, or that they socialize with other predators. Like people don't know that like sharks rarely fight each other. Like how many times have you been in the ocean? You've been in with many species of big sharks. Fight never broke out.
No, I think I've done several videos on this. It's pretty amazing how hard they work not to hurt each other. Because we humans are there, like, in order to get the sharks to come anywhere near us, because they really aren't interested. There's all this scent in the water. Sometimes there's actual bait there. And so the sharks are stimulated and they're trying to get the bait. And you would think with all these animals with razor sharp teeth rushing in that someone was going to get hurt. And yet they miraculously have fantastic aim at just getting the bait while managing to not even accidentally bite each other. I mean, it has to happen at some point, but it's so rare that I've never seen it with my own eyes. You know what I did? You know what I did see on the footage afterward going slow is that one, it was a lemon shark caught another lemon shark's fin and it actually opened its mouth wider in order to let that shark continue on rather than clamping down and being aggressive.
I remember that clip. I remember distinctly seeing that. I
Isn't
think
that amazing?
that was one of your older clips where that was one of the moments where I was just like, this guy's showing the stuff that nobody like. I remember asking the question, why is Shark Week not highlighting this? The shark went out of its way not to harm that individual. We're always saying it's like, oh, a shark wouldn't hesitate to eat its own young or eat another shark. And here in that exact moment, you could physically see the shark opening its mouth, trying not to bite the other shark.
So we're back to looking at the human species. It's like, what is it about us that just likes the violence? You know, Shark Week. I think the answer to your question is Shark Week won't sell as much. They you know, you can blame Shark Week to an extent for what they're doing, but they also do it as a response to the response that they're getting. So people
I
must
agree.
like watching the dumb stuff that portrays that always talks about danger and always talks about fear and then has a little snippet about, oh, but they're magnificent and we need to respect them. Yeah, thanks for throwing that in during your show that's completely based upon overhyping the situation.
Yeah, and there's I criticize Shark Week a lot. I personally don't like it, which is ironic because there was a point where it was good, but to the point that I'm making, Shark Week is the way it is because it has to be. Shark Week can't put out better Shark Week content because it can't, because it stops being Shark Week at that point. The moment it decides to focus on actual good shark content, it loses what's the most diplomatic way of putting it. Most people don't look as deep into things as we do. They just want junk food, for the lack of a better term, for their brain. Junk food. Shark Week has become junk food for it. So they don't put out better shark content because they can't, or rather, they don't think they can. And I would beg to differ. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put out better content and to show people aspects of, like, that's why I harp on shark intelligence so much. I always say sharks are way smarter than what we give them credit for. Like, I was floored when I saw your clip about black gill. I was like,
Oh,
holy
right,
smokes,
right.
that's a smart shark. I was like, sheesh. The
Man, it
fact that it
happened.
used other people as a trap. Other sharks, sorry.
It happens too many times. After a while, you can start skeptical, and after a while, you're like, okay, I have to give this shark credit for what I'm seeing. Eh,
Yeah, and it goes to, like, your point of what you said in the clip you sent me. It's like animals have personalities. They're far smarter if you look for it. But we were never taught to look for it in sharks. We were always taught teeth, big teeth.
I mean, I think that intelligence is fascinating. I think you could do some fantastic Shark Week shows based on intelligence. So the real question is, why does that only appeal to certain people? And why, you know, I I've gotten big into animal advocacy, and I've seen how humans treat a lot of species, hell, how we treat each other even. But keeping the intelligence level of another species low, it seems to help humans feel better for being the species in charge of the planet. A lot of times we seem kind of insecure. Like, people get really upset if I ever suggested anything smarter than a human. I mean, they get really upset. And I'm like, who cares, man?
I,
Are you comfortable with yourself or not? Maybe nothing's smarter than us. Maybe something is, but you're still you. But it really triggers something deep inside of humans, or at least some humans, to even suggest that we aren't absolutely way above everything else. And
yeah,
maybe we are, but why does it upset people so much that it's possible that we aren't?
I think it's the ego, and what I find hilarious is an argument that I will often make to folks to kind of like see where they are in their head is I'll say sharks are higher than humans, and then oftentimes folks say it like, look at all this stuff we built, look at all this technology and all this amazing things we don't. We've made medicines, we can edit genes on the cellular level, and so on. All those amazing things. Sharks have never done that. And then I asked them the question, why does a shark need to do that? It survived 400 million years without doing that. It's good to us, and that's not to take away from any of the stuff that we've actually done. But I think it's what I call part of the human condition. We're obsessed with ourselves. So when something is better than we are, we we take offense to that because it's like, no, we're supposed to be the best because we're always taught that we were supposed to be that way, and
Right.
sometimes that's not.
I mean, physically, there's no contest. The fact that the white shark is impervious to most diseases, can recover from uh, crazy injuries, their abilities, their senses, the streamline. If any of your listeners haven't seen a white shark and you have the opportunity to go and view one, I guarantee you're going to be blown away by how they glide by without even moving their bodies. They look like ghosts floating by. You have to be designed pretty darn efficiently to be able to move through the water without even uh, apparently moving. And so physically, it's not even close. Yet, white sharks are going to lose to humans, and therefore humans are going to say, well, obviously we're superior. I, let's say, how does a white shark even compete with that? It would have to turn to violence. So the shark would have to become evil and decide to dominate the planet and
Mm.
and and kill humans in order to obtain that idea of superiority. Well, is that a good thing? I mean, is that really
It's only a good thing to us.
right? And why do we think that's a good thing? Why do we have to be superior through subduing other creatures?
I think, and this can this could be a whole nother discussion. From what I gather is human beings became where we are now because we were the most violent. Like there was more than one species of Homo sapiens. There was Homo habilis and Homo australis. And the reason why Homo sapiens are here and the others aren't is because we're the most violent one. And I think,
Mm,
like on a deep philosophical level, that still exists within us. Like violence is a part of that. We were violent towards everything. Violence is how we dominated everything. So when something has the potential to beat us and we can't beat it in violence, we have to use our language. We have to. What I heard somebody say this: if there's no boogeyman, nobody gets paid. And sharks are a perfect boogeyman because we can't beat him in any other way. If you ask me.
hmm.
And speaking of which, one thing I wanted to ask you about is shark language, because how we phrase things often paints a very different picture for what sharks are like. Like, how many people know the difference between a shark bite and a shark attack?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I um very few. I mean, I don't even know if I do because I try not to use the word attack just based on the fact that we only use it with certain animals. Some animals were allowed to do things, and we never attach the word attack to it. A shark, it's immediately an attack. I mean, bumping is an attack. Swimming towards something is an attack. So now, obviously, the bite is an attack, but it was an attack way before it even bit anything. And I don't know if you're alluding to the fact that they also learn with their mouths because they don't have hands, but they mouth things. So
Hmm.
sometimes using their mouths isn't an attack. That is literally mouthing and finding out whether or not it's worth pursuing further.
Yeah. And that, I think that goes back to your point for what you said you like to do. You like to observe your behavior. And I fundamentally believe that anybody who has been in the water and spent a lot of time with sharks knows the difference between a shark mouthing something and a bite something. Like if you see a clip of a diver in the ocean and a shark is swimming towards them very relaxed and very slowly, so you'll see in the comments people are asking, "Oh my god, the shark's going to do something to them." People who think that have never seen a shark go after something full tilt. They've never seen a great white shark going after a seal. The speed, the intensity, the power. They have never seen that. And I think let's see here. I think Wild World said in the chat here, he said one of the highest rated shows on Shark Week was Megalodon, the monster shark.
Yeah.
I distinctly made a video saying Megalodon was not a monster. It was just it was a big shark. It was an animal. If Megalodon actually existed, it wouldn't even acknowledge our
And wasn't one of
not
their
as a
other
film.
biggest shows about mermaids existing? I mean,
Man, don't get me started.
hey, let me ask you or your viewers, if your viewers want to respond.
Of course.
If you got a diver and he's putting out tuna heads, and it's at the end of his hand or the end of his stick, and the shark comes through and uses his mouth to grab that tuna, is that an attack on the tuna?
So for those in the chat, you can put your answer in the comments. But I remember seeing this clip on YouTube, and I'll send it to you in the private chat for you when you want to check it out. But this guy, he was sitting in the water just by himself with some baby lemon sharks that were around him. And he took a piece of fish and stuck it in a little plastic bottle, stuck it right in front of him. And the lemon sharks were these are babies and they're trying to find it, but they couldn't. And he made a note that the adults were able to find it. So one, baby sharks, their senses aren't that well developed. But at one point, like any movement he made, it scared the sharks off. But then, like as he sat in the water for like a bit longer, they eventually got used to them. And then one of them trying to find it, one of them like nipped maybe a single hair off his leg, but then it realized it wasn't food and immediately shot off and swam away because it got scared.
Hmm.
Technically, that was a shark attack, according to most folks, because the shark accidentally like nipped a piece of his leg. It was a baby, and he saw the guy. He was just like, I didn't feel a thing. It was just like maybe like a little bit of a snip. But according to most folks, that's technically a shark bite, and that, if you ask me, paints a really big difference as to why shark language is so important. Some you
Um, did you? I think you cut out. Are you there?
again, you cut out for a sec.
Okay, there you are. Well, there's another reason that shark language is important. Y- the re- the recordings of shark attacks, quote unquote attacks across the world, everything got lumped just into attack. And it turns out when you go back through, a lot of them were incidents without even an injury. You know, sometimes it's a surfboard got bumped or even a jet ski got bumped. And but if it's all lumped under attack and you don't know anything else, and people look at that, they're like, "Oh wow, geez, sharks are horrifying." I mean, imagine if anything that you did, like if you gave a sideways glance to someone in the bar, that got listed under you get into bar brawls. Uh, you know, your list of offenses would be so long that you wouldn't be able to get hired at a job. It certainly creates a picture for a shark if all these things get lumped under the same category. So it's important. It's important to let people know sometimes the shark was at the end of a hook. It was being killed by the fisherman. And while the fisherman was removing the hook, he got bitten. Well, is that the same category as someone swimming and a shark saying, huh, what's this? Yeah, different category.
Yeah, no kidding. It's people often they miss context with a lot of things, and it kind of makes me think. Per this question, do you think do you think people keep shark attack as a vague term on purpose? Because if we kind of boil it down to brass knuckles or brass tacks or whatever they want to call it, or get a little bit more specific, sharks become a lot less terrifying. Instead of a shark attack, it was an exploratory bump, or it was an investigation, or the shark was curious. We can get a lot more distinctive. Like the clip you've probably seen of us fisherman, he said, "Oh, I got attacked by a shark." But if you see the clip, he shot the shark with a spear gun, and the shark charged him
Yeah.
because it's just like the shark's going to defend itself. It's not going to just sit there. But people miss that context.
Yeah, there's levels to this. There's that, which was bad enough, but like now people are just putting up so much fake stuff and people are running with it. It's like it's, these jerks yanked a shark out of the ocean and it landed on the deck. And all someone has to do is say the shark was so voracious to try and kill people that it jumped onto the boat trying to kill them. And it was a human killing the shark. But it's just the reality. I feel like humans are getting really disconnected from nature and are losing any ability that was there to know the difference between what's absurd and what an animal might actually do.
Yes, completely agree with that. Speaking of which, what is it? A book I recently read was The Ape That Understood the Universe. And one of the things that it brought up is something we did in the past, back when we were hunter gatherers. But one, when it came to hunting, we only took what we need. So we were still very much in tune with nature. But two, part of the reason our eyes face forward is because we would just stand in fields or sit in fields or in trees and we would just observe. That's how we learned to hunt so many different things and a wide variety of different predators. We observed them. We watched for things. We figured out stuff a lot more. Like one concept it brings up is the concept of a hammer. At one point in history, there was no concept of a hammer. But some of our ancestors in Africa, so they saw how a rhino would use its horns. Then one day, perhaps they looked at a particularly sharp rock and they tried to use it. But then one thing they would use was sticks. So one of them put two and two together and put a sharp rock at the end of a stick. Now you have another tool. But we got there through observation. And that's of how I came to some of my conclusions about sharks is by watching clips and observing them. Or when the few times I did dive with them, you would just watch the shark instead of pulling out your camera, watch what the shark does. I'm sure
Yeah,
you've done it way more than me.
it is important to do that. There's always a pressure to get as much footage as possible, but it's special to just sit and watch.
Exactly. It looks like we have some stuff in the comments.
Okay.
It said Shark Central. He said, but what about the video where the shark is actually committing an attack on a person and the attacks like the Red Sea or the Seminolis attack? They do happen at times. Sometimes they do.
Well,
Sometimes
I think it's interesting that when a shark does what everybody says sharks do, that people think it's evidence to condemn the animal. I'm like, we all already said this is what they are. Every introduction of sharks is the greatest killer ever known. All these abilities to kill, razor sharp teeth, all these different senses to kill. And then people are like, oh, wow, it killed a human. Well, what the hell? Well, why wouldn't it? I think it's more miraculous that sharks leave us alone the way that they do. And with the Red Sea example, it really disturbs me that this detail gets left out. They dump livestock carcasses in there and had done it during the oceanic white tip incident that was so famous.
really, I didn't know that.
Humans always change the environment to ultimately influence the behavior of the animal. I'm not saying sharks are innocent, but if you keep putting yourselves in bad situations, not just putting yourselves in them, but creating bad situations, and there's one of the most ultimate predators that's ever existed in that bad situation, how are you going to turn around and act surprised that that predator bit an easy prey item in the middle of a highly stimulated situation? It's just crazy how we flip the standard of judgment. It's like, oh, it's the craziest killer ever known. Here, let's put ourselves in a dangerous situation and then act surprised that something happened.
that and that kind of that actually leads me into like the next topic that I'm sure both you and I will tear heavily into Shark Week. The biggest elephant, well, I guess elephant seal in this case in the room. The When Shark Week has Jackass on the show, that should tell you everything you need to know about the state of it. But there's a time when they were doing a bunch of these downright irresponsible stunts with the Jackass guys, and then
Yeah.
surprise, surprise, somebody got bit. Now, luckily, it wasn't too serious. I'm glad the guy was okay, but at a certain point, you got to ask, like, what'd you think was going to happen? You were doing unsafe, irresponsible things with predators in the ocean, and you get surprised when something actually happens. Like,
Well, I see Wild World mentioned a something that was listed as an attack on a fisherman when in fact a hammerhead had been hooked. Well, that has happened with a white shark too. One of the only cases of a white shark biting someone in Southern California. Well, a guy had been fighting a white shark on his line for somewhere close to an hour, something like that, before the shark was freed. So you have an animal that's like thinks it's been threatened. It's probably in quite a state of mind, and it swam off and ran right into a swimmer and bit the swimmer. I'm like, can you imagine just judging a human being who's just had the crap beat out of him and then is running and then runs into another one of the same type of creature that just caused that harm, and judging that person for lashing out violently or defensively? I mean,
agreed.
think about how many times the sharks run into people and don't bite them. That's what people should be mind blown by, but they should also be mind blown by the fact that humans are constantly abusing these animals in fishing situations And I'm sure there's a lot of fishermen. Uh, that's probably not politically correct anymore. Fishing people, fish
Oh
people.
God, that's a whole nother conversation in and of itself.
But if you look at it for what it is, something's being fighting for its life, and either it gets released or it escapes on its own. But that's not a very good experience to go through. And then you are doing that in an area where humans are also recreating. That's so irresponsible. Blame the swimmer, blame the fisherman, but we, the most intelligent species, are doing that.
One
Recreate
of these
recreating where people are hurting animals that have teeth.
exactly. One of these days, I'm gonna put a compilation together because there's this guy on Instagram I follow. His name is Scott Fairchild, and a big thing he does is he shows clips of people on surfboards with white sharks in the water, like right below them, and he'll
Yeah.
show like the white shark just swimming right past the person or the swimmer.
Yeah.
Like the swimmer will swim like directly over the shark, won't even know the shark's there, and the
Yeah.
great white doesn't bother them. Or even in some case where the great white will sometimes start following a human swimming or on the surfboard, but then as soon as it gets close and sees it as a human, the shark turns away. Nobody ever pays attention to that.
Yeah. And it's SoCal is a great example. It happens at other beaches, and it's really hard to see what's in the water if you're anywhere near eye level in the water. The drone gives a completely different perspective, but you see these people that aren't even surfing. They're actually like bathing or walking around, and they still have no idea that there's a shark right next to them. And the shark just swims past them. Like, yeah, this is not anything that I want. You're just in my way. They smoothly navigate around the clumsy humans that are in the water. And just the percent of time that happens, people should really, really be mind blown by that.
I always my thought process was always that sharks are more confused by us rather than like, oh God, food. No, they don't see us as food. Like they've evolved for millions upon millions of years to eat a specific thing. Something new comes along, that's
Yeah,
new. So they may be confused or curious, but
it's
they
it's a
don't view it as food.
it's a great point. There's a lot of human ego thinking that everything revolves around us, like the thought that a shark or any other predator in the ocean is going to drop what it's doing because we entered it. I'm like, well, they had a plan. Do people understand that these animals had a purpose and exist for a reason, and we have nothing to do with that reason? So, in addition to them, us not having anything to do with them, the fact that a creature that doesn't belong in the ocean is there, sure, they might be a little bit curious or even scared or like, what in the hell? So, we're interfering with natural processes by being there.
Yes, and then as you said before, sometimes when they mouth something, oh my God, the shark's trying to eat him. No, he's trying to figure out what you are. Again, if people who have actually seen like a great white or a bull shark or especially like makos, if they've seen them like go after something full tilt, it's extremely fast, extremely high energy, and like I can say this now, but it doesn't do it justice. I'm sure you've seen it in person where a shark is going after something and like it reminds you that you're dealing with a shark. You're like, holy smokes. And they don't attack us? Jesus. I'm glad.
Yeah, I remember in the Bahamas, I was walking over to the ascent line, so I was by myself, and something killed something. And it was a whole different level than just having scent in the water. This was death. This was the vibration of death. And the sharks changed. They were they were kind of cruising, just kind of like, where's that smell coming from? Am I going to be able to get some? To, oh, death. And the speed changed, and some came toward me, and they realized, nope, this is not where that signal is coming from. But boy, and they were probably still going like half speed, and you just saw how easy it would be for them to go to a whole different level.
Yeah. Like it's it's kind of where you tell folks like I don't know how much you've encountered a moose. I personally haven't, but I know people who have. They always say like everybody knows moose are big. And then one stands next to your car and reality sinks in. They're like, "Oh, crap, I'm dealing with a wild animal here."
Hmm.
Like the reality of what you have to deal with in front of you. Like I think you brought this point up in one of your recent videos. Like there's some people who like sharks just because they like the idea of a shark because it's cool. But then they actually go and hop in the ocean. They have to deal with the reality of what a shark is. Like you have to respect them, but understand like you're in their domain. And this is not calling them dangerous, but when it comes time for them to eat something, they can be very intense animals. And there's people who actually like them, who like get attached to their personalities, do their research, see more than just teeth.
Some shark advocates think it's bad to refer to a shark as dangerous. I don't, because I think it would be um, pretty delusional to not describe a shark as dangerous. I think human beings are dangerous. You know, if you have the ability, the potential to cause harm, then you've got to be in the category of dangerous. And the more ability that you have to cause harm, you got to be in the dangerous category. You can be dangerous and not inflict harm, but the potential is there.
I agree. I think another guy on YouTube, gentleman named Shark Bites. I think he's a shark scientist. I think he put it best. He said, "Sharks aren't monsters, but they're not puppy dogs either. They're sharks. Like they when you're in the water with them and they don't do anything to you, it's because they are choosing not to. And I do mean choosing. Like
Oh, absolutely.
sharks are smart animals. They know you're not food. If they wanted to, they could absolutely take you out. At least some of them.
Well,
Because
we go back to what we're talking about. Humans don't have the perspective of what it's like to just survive. It's not just the shark being merciful. If it doesn't benefit the shark, it's stupid to engage in it. You know, it's like
exactly.
that's not what I eat. And people need to remember that, especially with scuba gear on, they're not exactly small creatures. So for a shark to say, "Oh, look at that thing that's my size," or in some cases even bigger, I'm just going to rush in and bite it, even though I don't know what it is. Well, if an animal behaved that way, it wouldn't live very long. So
Agreed.
that's not what they. That's not how their thought processes uh, take place, or instincts, or whatever people are more comfortable attributing to them. And I see Shark Central mentioned Eric Ritter. I actually knew Eric. I was very sad that he passed away before we could do our podcast together, because
My condolences.
he had a fresh perspective on a lot of things on his podcast. But unfortunately, most people remember him for having his calf bitten off by a bull shark. and and he was like, "Yeah, that was that was bad. It was a bad situation. I think he said the cameraman had been moving, and the it got really cloudy. And bull sharks, being sharks that are known to be in rivers, river mouths, or even the transition between the ocean and freshwater, do spend time in uh, water that's not really terribly good visibility. And he said that the shark kind of felt him out and was like, "Yeah, that is flesh. I'm going to go ahead and see how this goes." And bull shark teeth, it doesn't take much to remove the flesh once they bite down.
I, I don't think people understand like how fragile a human body is. Like I did a video not too long ago about sharks being the champions of muscle because they are. A typical shark's body is 85% muscle, while the average human male is about 40-ish, I think. But people don't understand like how much of a tank a shark actually is. Like the describe them would be a swimming muscle, especially nurse sharks. But to your point, yeah, dealing with the reality of a shark, even like when some folks do, they're like, "Oh, yeah, it was a shark. I mean, it happened." When something bad does happen, they don't blame the shark. They understand it's like, okay, sometimes things just go wrong, and they're not upset with the shark.
Oh shit! Are you
Uh
still
oh.
there? Oh, I
Yeah, I'm here.
okay. My finger hit something in the
Okay,
okay.
no worries.
Um, Yeah. What was I distracted myself. Oh, we really are fragile. I remember scuba diving in Monterey and coming up and seeing a sea lion that had a half moon bite taken out of it, and it was, it was alive, and it was,
Oh,
healing. It was healing. I'm like, no human would ever survive that, or even close. Like, other animals are built different. We, you know, you cut your leg wrong and you're gonna bleed out.
exactly. But I guess that also goes back to that thing we were talking earlier about being in tune with nature. I think we were a little more resilient to certain things when we had to live with them and deal with them on a daily basis. Now, there were some things that we couldn't deal with, like very, very bad diseases. And because of modern medicine, we can live a lot longer. Of course, I understand that. But I think we were naturally more resilient back in the day when we had to deal with like nature on a daily basis, face to face. That's just total headcanon, but it's just something that I think.
I would imagine we learned that, I don't know. I would like to go back to when we had plenty of wildlife running around, and animals hadn't learned to be scared of the sight of a human, and see what that interaction would be like. Because I doubt if very many species saw Homo sapiens as a prey item. I wonder how much we really had to worry about it. I mean, things happen. If you're an easy meal and the animal needs to eat something, that's kind of different than saying an animal has adopted your species as a food source.
Exactly. Like I know there are still some hunter gatherer tribes in Africa, and I was reading this I was listening to this book called Burn. It was uh it was about human metabolic rates, story for another time. But they were doing some studies with some African tribes, and they remember coming back in the morning and said, yeah, there was some lions just made a kill over there, like a couple yards away. So literally scared the lions off and just took the food from them. And I was just like, that's a pack of lions. You understand that, right? And they just did. And it was ridiculously interesting because like for lions, like um, what was it, like a 400 pound cat getting scared off by a human? Like, to your point, like animals learn to be scared of us again because we're the most violent.
Yeah, and it's unnatural. They don't know how to react to something like that, because other animals, um, as a lion, they are accustomed to not having to be too intimidated by very many other species. And most species understand that and adhere to that rule. And when another species comes along and doesn't adhere to that rule, the lion, even if the lion could kill the human, who might be like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. I'm leaving. I don't know what's happening, but I don't like it.
Exactly. And obviously, since we're talking about sharks, I imagine it would come up eventually. The story of Megalodon. So I to death where a lot of folks talk about like, oh, if Megalodon was alive and everything, it would cause so much death and destruction. It would do so much that I don't think people understand how big a megalodon is and how much a megalodon has to eat
Oh,
to
death,
sustain its life.
death to humans? No,
So yeah, so exactly.
yeah,
So to that point, and I'm trying to explain to people like
it's that
a
human ego
megalodon
again.
wouldn't acknowledge us if we were in the ocean with it. Like, do you realize how much energy it would take to power a body that big just to chase a little morsel? That's like you running a marathon just to eat a piece of broccoli.
I mean, that even applies to some existing white sharks. They're big enough to where we're not a good enough reward. I mean, we're nothing in terms of a food reward compared to a pinniped.
Exactly. And that's the point I try to drive home with people. Like there's the Meg movie series where folks are like, oh my God, this shark went on, it was killing all these people on the beach. I'm like, a megalodon wouldn't do that. Like
Think about
it's
the way that movies and unfortunately even nature channels portray animals. It's like the only thing that they exist to do is kill. And these trailers, I never saw Meg 2, but I remember, one animal is trying to kill another animal, and then a bigger one's trying to kill that one, and eventually the Meg jumps out and kills the biggest one. All anything wants to do is kill. And that's how nature is portrayed to humans. There's a lot of life.
Exactly.
There's a lot to life other than killing. For a while, for in fact, maybe that's why they're portrayed that way. Is because humans spend so much time dedicated to violence that they have our hard time understanding nature is actually peaceful compared to us.
Yeah, and it's not. It's nature isn't the movies. If two big predators see each other in the wild, unless they're like specific predators, most of the time they're going to leave each other alone because they both understand they can f each other up big time. But also, like predators, funny enough, when you're in nature, herbivores are more likely to mess with you than predators because if the predator's full, he's like, okay, I'm full, leave me alone. But herbivores, they don't know what you are, so most of them just assume malice. Like when you see walking up to a buffalo, it's like, oh, it's friendly, like it's a Disney movie. I'm like, a buffalo will put you into a car. What do you mean?
Yeah.
But no, I just the whole megalodon thing about like, oh, megalodon, it would cause so much stuff. I'm like, a megalodon probably wouldn't even acknowledge you if it was in the ocean with you.
Well, why do people want to talk about megalodon so badly? That's been a popular topic for so long. Uh, why do people? I don't know. I don't even know
It's
what the draw is. I find
it's
it
it,
annoying. I hate talking about megalodon.
it's the T Rex of sharks. So people are just like, oh my god, big shark with big teeth. I'm like, it was more than that. But I also use that as like, hey, look, megalodon isn't here anymore, but we still have a bunch of other sharks, so we should appreciate the ones that we do have while we're still here. Hence your point of advocacy. Like we still have a lot of cool sharks that we still have here. Like we have a shark that lives over 400 years old, and folks are like, no, I still want to talk about big shark with big teeth when it was way more than just that.
Mm. Yep. Always looking for a bigger fantasy instead of appreciating what we have.
But yeah, were there any questions that you wanted to ask me or ask the audience?
Um, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Well, I suppose before we start to wrap things up here, are there any pieces of shark media or books that you recommend?
Man, what's the last shark movie that I watched? Trying to think of a good shark book too. I'm disappointed by so many of them. I gotta. It's actually an interesting uh, question that you pose. I'm gonna have to come up with a good one to recommend to people. I've been reading so many research papers, so I haven't read any like fun shark stuff in a while.
Hey, I've got a few books and I can probably send you the list. One of them is called Sharkpedia by Daniel Abel. After this, I'll send you the link to it. It's a book I'm reading.
Sharkpedia.
Sharkpedia, and it's actually like I'm thoroughly enjoying it so far. It's a small book; you can almost fit it in your pocket, but it's like it's a very down to earth shark book. And he wrote another book called the Life of Sharks. And then one of my favorite authors, Richard Ellis, he wrote the book Shark: A Visual History.
Mm.
Unfortunately, Richard Ellis, he actually recently passed away, but he was a shark artist like myself, but he had a big influence on me. And he was one of the guys who said that, hey, look, I think the most influential film in America is Jaws because of how much it has ruined the reputation of sharks for people and swayed them to like have this irrational fear of sharks.
Yeah, and I think that's actually more of a story about successful filmmaking because it's not the first and not even close to the last shark horror film. There was just something about the way that it was made that resonated with people.
I agree. Absolutely.
And I don't did you watch my videos where I looked back at Jaws and I actually asked what was the true damage in it?
Yes, I remember going to that one specifically. I remember you were nothing short of surgical in that, where you were pointing out like little details, like pieces of dialogue that they just threw out there that nobody caught on to. Like the guy who was supposed to be the scientist, just little pieces of dialogue that he threw out. Nobody caught on to it until you brought it up, and I was like, you know what? I never thought about that. I distinctly remember that video.
Well, I think that stood out to me as a child. Maybe that's why I remember it, because here are your authority figures in the show, and the guy who's the expert on the shark said, "Yes, that's correct. They will do that to you." And I was like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah, no kidding.
And it wasn't true.
Yeah, and look, I saw Jaws when I was a kid, like, well, what was it, like middle school, high school, and seeing that as a kid. And then as I started doing more research on them, I discovered I was just like, wait a sec, these guys were wrong. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Just that understanding is like, again, that's also around the time where I started to really find your video and your channel. Hence why, again, I'm honored to have had the opportunity to interview you here. So before we close things out, where can people find your stuff, and when can they expect to see this new movie you have coming out, Mr. Skyler?
Thank you, and congratulations on your channel. I see you've grown quite well, and I'm glad that I was able to be an influence. Wild World, I see your comment. Thank you. I'm glad you are a fan of the channel. Uh, I I would say my channel. I'm just kind of like not into social media much anymore beyond YouTube. So
I don't blame you.
every now and then I'll update my website, whitesharkvideo.com. But I would just go to the YouTube /Whiteshark video. And I may even need to change that title, just incorporate my name or something so that people can associate it better. But the film is going to start with the film festival circuit. I'm hoping to get some distribution for it. I've worked really hard on it for many years, so it's not something that is meant to just go to YouTube. I want it to get some recognition and some momentum, so that maybe some people will be interested in seeing it, because the message is pretty important.
Absolutely. Well, hey, at least on this channel, I'll be sure to promote it as soon as I see it. I look forward to watching it because that it sounds like it goes over a topic that is near and dear to my heart.
Cool. I will certainly let you know.
Well, hey, look, I know you're a busy man, so I won't keep you. Thank you very much, Mr. Skyler, for giving us some of your time for today. And looking forward to the next time we talk.
Me too. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Have a good one.
All right.